Why it's a really good time to be a buyer and why it's a really good time to be a seller. So I look at it from two perspectives. Buyers, great opportunity for the appreciation. Because demand is so strong, we're seeing home values still go up. It's the one fundamental that you can't ignore. Home values are not slowing down at this point, even with an 8% interest rate. If you're looking to sell your house, you've got all the leverage in the world because of such a scarce market. I'm Matt Blanchard. I work at Academy Mortgage in Beverly, Massachusetts, and we have a few things in real estate economics that are, working together. There's a push and pull that's always going on. It's that, old school supply and demand reality that is real estate. Right now, the demand is exceptionally high. The inventory, the supply, is exceptionally low. In the 90s, early 90s, 1990s specifically, we had a huge rise in US home births. The boomers, that generation, started having children. And what they did is they created the largest demographic patch we've ever had in history, the millennials. Well, those millennials are anywhere from 33 to 36 years old today. They are now the largest age demographic in our country. And we're stockpiling them right now as homeowners, as home buyers. They're lined up waiting for something to buy. But because of what's gone on over the last few years, COVID related a lot of it, we've reduced our inventory. We've made it very hard and more unaffordable to buy a home than we've seen in many, many years, if not ever. And so what we're realizing is that these young people are being stockpiled as new buyers, while the sellers are kind of frozen. They're stuck in place. They don't know where to go. They don't know if they should sell. They don't know if they want to move up. They don't know if they want to move down. And so we're in a tug of war. There's a push and pull in real estate that we haven't seen really ever before. And some of it is due to the artificial environment that COVID and the pandemic led us to. And we're working our way through it right now. We've seen a swing in interest rates. 8% interest rates in October, highest we'd seen in decades and decades. Luckily, they're working their way down. But what's gonna happen when they work down? What does all this mean? What does this built up tension in the market mean? Well, it's pretty safe to say that there's no bubble bursting right now. Back in 05 leading into 08, we had the reverse scenario with the demographics. We had actually just had the largest number or fewest number of Americans come through in terms of family or household, or I don't want to call it originations, but household creations. And that's because coming out of that time period in 05 to 08, we had fewer 33-year-olds coming through. That coincided with everything else that went on with ninja loans, no income, no job, no asset loans, and all the problems that we had in the mortgage industry leading into 05 and 08. Now is not 05 and 08. It's a totally different scenario. The underlying fundamentals of where we are today are much stronger than they were back then because it all comes down to demographics. The number of young people that we have ready to go is just growing while inventory stays low. Here in Essex County, our numbers tend to be much different than the national narrative. Nationally, right now, let's call it October of 2023, we're looking at 3.3 months supply of single-family homes nationally. And that's the National Association of Realtors data line. In Essex County, the Massachusetts Association of Realtors is showing 1.5 months supply of inventory. That means we have less than half the inventory in Essex County than the rest of the country is showing on average. So here, specifically, northeastern Massachusetts, we're in a much tighter environment. Home values here are significantly higher, almost $800,000 here versus in the 400s across the rest of the country as an average. Why do I talk about all that? Because the local narrative is not the same as the national narrative. Last year, national news covered low inventory all the time, nonstop. It was on loop. The national narrative was that we had the lowest inventory in history. Well, here, today, Essex County, that's true, but not many people are talking about it. So here I am talking about it. So what does this mean if you're a buyer and a seller? We've got the lowest inventory in history and this massive group of young people who want to buy houses. It means it's a great time to be a buyer or a seller. How does that all work, right? You've got a great time to be a buyer and a seller, usually those two wouldn't go together. Well, if you're a seller, you're working in a market where you're the beneficiary of scarcity in the market. You may be the only house in your neighborhood on the market. Right now, 54% of all real estate is owned by people 55 years and older. At a certain point, they're all gonna start to sell their houses. They're gonna be forced to sell their houses. And when that happens, inventory will likely lift. So right now, you have the benefit as a seller to leverage that scarcity. It's a great option. If you're the only house in your perfect little neighborhood everybody wants to move into, you can leverage that. If you're the perfect house for the perfect buyer at a perfect price point, you can leverage that. If there's two other properties in your neighborhood at the same price point, now they start to nitpick. Now you don't get to be in the driver's seat. As a seller, there are lots of tools to you that you can leverage because of the scarcity. You can do leasebacks, meaning you sell your house and then you stay in your house. You have your cash and you rent for 60 days while you go look for a new house, maybe even longer. There are opportunities like this that in a competitive environment where there's not as much scarcity, you won't be able to have these opportunities. As a buyer, why do I think it's a great time to be a buyer with 7+% interest rates? Because home values are still going up. This is the most important thing when you look at the bigger picture of home ownership. Last month, Case-Shiller Home Index came out and showed a 0.7% increase in home value month over month. That's a 0.7% increase, and in that time period, we're approaching 8% interest rates. So even with 8% interest rates, home values didn't start to slow down. That goes against, the standard economics of real estate. When interest rates go up, home values are supposed to go down. Well, that hasn't been happening. Year to date, Case-Shiller is showing 6.6% appreciation. So yes, borrowing at 7% is higher than it's been in many, many years. Probably not your ideal interest rate. But with a home appreciation at 6.6%, those two things, I'm not gonna say they cancel each other out, but it does make moving into home ownership a lot more palatable when you get to realize 6% appreciation. And the nuance to this is most people, when they buy a house, they're not buying in cash. So you get to realize that appreciation, and you may have borrowed 90% of the money from the bank, yet you get to realize the appreciation on the whole of the asset. One of these things that people don't often talk about or think about, but sitting back and paying rent, that money's not going anywhere. It's going to your landlord, as everyone will tell you, but if you move in, you get to build that equity stake as time goes on. These two things are the two talking points I go to most when people say, well, I'm not ready to sell. I don't think it's a good market to sell. And then when people say interest rates are too high, market's too competitive, it's not a great time to buy. These are the two things that I focus on most right now and the most relevant given the state of the economic scenario, the demographic scenario, and real estate as a whole. So if you're thinking about buying, great time to just call me. Get started, because inventory's low. You may not find that perfect house for a while, but at least you know where you stand and you can start and be ready if something comes on. We can talk about the numbers if it does make sense for you. If you're thinking about selling, downsizing especially, have a conversation in advance. You have a lot to leverage with the equity in your existing home. In the last 5 years, home values have gone up 66% in Essex County. In 2015, median sales price was about $475. We're looking at about $790 for the median home price in Essex County right now. So you could leverage that equity in advance of selling your house. No one wants to be homeless. There are strategies to make sure that you're not homeless when you downsize, but have the conversations in advance, because that same low inventory scenario that the buyers are faced with, well, when you sell, you become a buyer too. So make sure you're leveraging what you can in advance, because when the perfect house comes on, they go so quick. Call me today, whether you're a buyer or a seller, so you're ready for when that perfect house comes on.